Welcome back, guys, to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about something different, and today what we're going to be talking about is the whole situation between Concacaf and Ottawa Fury, and how Concacaf basically told them on December 12th that they would not be sanctioning Ottawa Fury to play in the USL for the 2019 season, despite US soccer and Canadian soccer allowing it. Ottawa Fury was widely regarded to be the CPL's 8th team, but actually then later on, I think in September, they were like, well, yeah, we don't want to join the CPL because it's a new league. We want to see how it will pan out over the next few years, and then we'll join it once we feel we're ready and once the league looks like it's a stable league to join. But it looks like Concacaf will force the process of them joining the CPL, or the Fury board will have to decide to fold the team. So the reason behind Concacaf's ruling, as at least from what I found out, was it sounded like Concacaf told them a few years ago when Ottawa decided to join the USL, well, you're allowed to join the USL, we'll make the exception. I think Concacaf generally has a rule that you're not allowed to play in another associations league, but at the time, there was no stable league that offered soccer at the level that Ottawa Fury was trying to play at. So they said, hey, you can play in the USL, we'll make that exception. But it sounded like they made that exception with the thought that Ottawa Fury, once the Canadian Premier League was created, that Ottawa Fury would go and move to the Canadian Premier League. But of course, Ottawa Fury declined that idea, which really makes it so that Concacaf decided, well, hey, we told you, so we're going to make you go into the Canadian Premier League, and you'll face the consequences of not having as much preparation and such. Even Ottawa Fury created a clause with the USL when they first joined so that they could join the CPL as long as they gave the USL enough notice. Ottawa has already stated that they would stay in the USL for 2019, I believe in September, like I was saying before, but Concacaf said that they weren't consulted by any parties. From my research that I gathered, it sounded like they weren't consulted by any parties before the USL came up with this decision. So, I mean, before Ottawa Fury said that they're going to stay in the league, so it really sounded like Ottawa was hoping and expecting to stay in the USL until they found out that they weren't going to be in the USL. The former president of the Canadian Soccer Association is the current president of Concacaf now, and it really seems that this decision that he's doing at least is partially part of the plot so that he can create more traction for the Canadian Premier League by forcing Ottawa Fury into the Canadian Premier League. So I find that's a little bit sketchy what the CONCACAF president is trying to do. And it's certainly interesting because I really wonder if things would have panned out in a different way had he not been necessarily crazily supporting the Canadian Premier League. The president of Ottawa Fury has stated how he believes this is unfair, as the club's already signed a bunch of players to their contracts for the next season, and they've already sold 1,500 seasons tickets, roughly, going into their season for the USL. So, in terms of groups that have supported Ottawa Fury throughout this process are Canada Soccer, US Soccer, and recently Toronto FC, Vancouver Whitecaps, and Montreal Impact. All three of the MLS teams have supported Ottawa Fury in their struggles here. Ottawa Fury is stating that they're consulting lawyers currently, and it sounds like they might take legal action on this. So in terms of my opinion, although I really want Ottawa Fury to be part of the CPL so that the Canadian Premier League gains more traction, I'm very split on this ruling and on this decision. In terms of my points against CONCACAF's decision, I really think that Ottawa Fury's signed players, so why are they being forced to move into the Canadian Premier League when a lot of teams seem to be signing players who are on lower wages, which means that Ottawa Fury is going to come into the Canadian Premier League, if they end up moving there, with a bunch of players who really are above the quality of all the other teams and will be a lot more expensive. I mean, which will lead to Ottawa Fury potentially losing a lot more money than any of the other teams, and it's really unfair to Ottawa Fury. Also, fans were informed that Ottawa Fury was going to be staying in the USL for 2019, so some of the fans may have bought tickets partly because of the thought that, hey, they're going to stay in the USL, they're going to be staying at a certain level of quality, so I'll buy my season's tickets based on that. Also, this decision was made very late, so it's going to be very hard for Ottawa Fury to join the CPL now, so Concacaf might as well leave Ottawa Fury alone for this season and tell them to move next year, because it's really unfair how there's already players signed to the teams in the CPL, and then Ottawa Fury haven't really been scouting for players based on the thought that they're going to be in the USL, so it's really unfair to them that they have to move this late in the year to the CPL. In terms of my opinions against, on the other hand, TFC2 has left the USL Championship. They moved to who's going to be the newly formed league, USL League 1, which means that Ottawa Fury will be the only Canadian team in the USL Championship, which could make things a lot more complicated for USL, but they're willing to take on those problems in this, as USL supports Ottawa Fury in this process. But on the other hand, you have to consider that this does make it a little awkward. It makes the Canadian league system really awkward, that there's one Canadian team here, one Canadian team there, 3 Canadian teams over there, and then, we've got a Canadian Premier League. Just makes things overly complicated. It also sounded like Ottawa Fury stated that they would be in the USL in a way of hoping and assuming that they would be in USL, which really they misunderstood everything that Concacaf said, or they were just saying this so that if Concacaf doesn't allow Ottawa Fury to be in USL next year, that they could play the victim and say, well, hey, we didn't know, when actually Concacaf never approved. They never said that they would sanction Ottawa Fury in the USL for the 2019 season, but that they announced that they would stay in the USL without even informing Concacaf on this. So you could argue that for a reason for the decision. Also, another argument for it is that Concacaf stated that it sounded like they were very clear in stating that, hey, you can stay in the USL because you're under a very awkward circumstance where you can't join MLS. You probably don't want to join the Canadian Soccer League, which is really falling apart, and that's not really a good quality league. So you can join USL for the moment being, because in the Canadian soccer system there isn't a decent quality league that could really support your team. So you can join USL for the time being, but once the Canadian Premier League is launched, and then you have to join it because it's somewhat close to the quality of your team. So it sounded like they stated that, and Ottawa Fury generally just ignored that and decided to go on their own and say that they might join CPL in the next few years, which Concacaf has decided that they won't approve. It sounded like they were fairly clear about that. Anyway, I know this is a controversial topic among all of you fans watching Canadian soccer unfold. Certainly a very controversial topic in my head while I'm thinking of my opinions. As you can see that I'm very split on this, but I want to hear your opinions in the comments down below. So if you do have a point, if you do have an argument that you want to state, please state it in the comments down below. Don't forget to like if you did enjoy the video, and subscribe if you want to see more content about the Canadian Premier League and about Major League Soccer. And until next time, see ya.